Good afternoon, everyone. We're just giving a few minutes for our participants to join, and then we'll start the webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to CARPHA's COVID-19 Health Rounds webinar, Preparing for COVID-19 Vaccine Safety Surveillance in the Caribbean. This webinar is jointly presented by CARPHA's Medicines Units, the Caribbean Regulatory System, and the Medicines Quality Control and Surveillance Department, with our long-term partner, the Pan American Health Organization, and we're very pleased that you were able to join us this afternoon. I am your moderator, Ms. Nicole Ennis, head of the Medicines Quality Control and Surveillance Department. The Caribbean, along with the rest of the world, continues to feel COVID-19's impact on public health, economic and social systems as we enter month 11 of the pandemic. A safe and effective treatment is therefore one of the highest priorities in controlling and ending the pandemic. Our countries are preparing to ensure access to COVID-19 vaccines through collaborative mechanisms. And so this webinar comes at an important time, aiming to identify system requirements for effective vaccine safety surveillance in the Caribbean and areas for potential collaboration among key stakeholders. We have a distinguished panel of experts I will introduce soon. But first, I open the floor to Dr. Joy St. John, our Executive Director, to bring welcome remarks from CARPHA.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ennis. Mrs. Jessie Choutenay, Caribbean Subregional Program Coordinator with PAHO. Dr. Jose Luis Castro, PAHO Advisor, Medicines, Vaccines, and Other Health Technologies. Dr. Desiree Pastor, PAHO Advisor, Comprehensive Family Immunization Unit, Department of Family, Gender, and Life Course. Chief Medical Officers of CARICOM, Pharmaceutical Regulators, and Technical Officers of National Regulatory Authorities, Immunization Program Officers, International Program Officers for Pharmacovigilance, fellow health professionals with an interest in this area, CARPHA staff, colleagues, good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this special edition of the CARPHA COVID-19 Health Rounds entitled Preparing for COVID-19 Vaccine Safety Surveillance in the Caribbean. You are well aware that I am proud of this series, but this afternoon's topic is focused on the regulatory, surveillance, and pharmacovigilance systems that CARPHA and PAHO are jointly constructing to ensure due diligence in the delivery of COVID-19 vaccine. The Caribbean has been a world leader in the elimination of vaccine-preventable diseases because of the robust expanded programs on immunization and high levels of vaccine coverage. The Caribbean has sustained its measles-free status since 1991 and eradicated endemic smallpox, polio, rubella, and congenital rubella syndrome. Fast forward to 2020, and the world is gripped in the clutches of COVID-19, the novel virus with no approved treatment or vaccine yet. Coalitions of countries are moving with care to perform hundreds of trials in the race to produce vaccines that work and immunity that lasts for billions of people. Our Medicines Quality Control and Surveillance Department, along with the Caribbean regulatory system, continue to work together to compile information on ongoing research for potential treatments and vaccines for COVID-19. They provide weekly updates on safety of investigational therapies or vaccines for COVID-19, falsified medical products for COVID-19, regulation of COVID-19 diagnostic tests, and guidance or warnings issued by medicines regulatory agencies, such as the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, European Medicines Agency, WHO, and PAHO. In so doing, they share updates on safety of emerging or investigational COVID-19 vaccines and therapies and falsified medical products identified by WHO and other regulatory authorities through the VigiCarib network. CARPHA has determined that the COVAX facility was the safest bet to ensure the sustained provision of safe, efficacious vaccines to the Caribbean. Therefore, we are enormously proud that we have been able to broker the collaboration between CARPHA, the European Union, and PAHO for the down payment of more than US $2 million to Gavi for 9 CARPHA member states to ensure access to the COVID-19 vaccine when it becomes available. Today, you will hear from CARPHA and PAHO and how they will continue to collaborate on ensuring that what comes to the Caribbean is carefully scrutinized all the way from the manufacturer to the point when the healthcare provider delivers that life-saving shot. We will also describe the strengthening of the national immunization programs and the collaboration with the regulatory arms of PAHO and CARPHA to ensure vaccine storage and distribution supports the delivery of a safe vaccine and will capture any incident of concern for thorough investigation. While the COVID-19 pandemic is a challenge to public health and health systems, I always say it has had a silver lining because it has provided us with an opportunity to strengthen our national pharmacovigilance systems, improve collaboration with our trusted international development partners, and build confidence in the national, regional, and international public health professionals. Stronger systems that communicate regularly with all stakeholders will help health professionals and patients to know the what, the when, the where, and the how a vaccine is good. So if anything goes wrong, they know to report suspected adverse reactions and quality defects encountered so the system can be quickly corrected. So now, listen carefully and let the experienced professionals explain to you why I say this is a special edition of the CARPHA COVID-19 Health Rounds. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. St. John, for perfectly setting the start of the webinar. I now invite Mrs. Jessie Shuteni, Caribbean Sub-Regional Program Coordinator at PAHO, to bring welcome remarks.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody. Esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm pleased to share that we had about 200 participants that from the Caribbean that have registered for this event, which indicates the interest in the topic. We have persons representing drug inspectors, chief pharmacists, and EPI managers. I know everyone is very busy, so thank you so much for joining this event. And in this event, we'll discuss one of the subjects that I believe is very timely and of the essence at this moment. It's on the importance and the preparedness for the introduction of the future COVID-19 vaccine, the vaccine that we're all anxiously awaiting. And I want to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Joy St. John for her leadership and thank CARPHA for the close collaboration and for providing this space in its COVID-19 health rounds for us to be able to discuss and to dialogue on this important topic with all of you this afternoon. I have a couple points to share with you. The first is on the importance of preparedness for the future vaccine. As you all know, the world is eagerly awaiting the results of the current trials of the vaccines against COVID-19. Today, there's an overabundance of information from numerous sources, some reliable and others less reliable, regarding the vaccine development process, the safety of the candidate vaccines, and the different mechanisms that countries have at their disposal for procuring and accessing a potential safe and effective vaccine. While progress and attention has been focused on these trending and still very relevant topics, many countries have silently and diligently started to advance and plan so that their health systems and services are ready for the introduction of a potential vaccine. We know that the existence of a proven, safe, and effective vaccine is not enough. This is why we need to be prepared to introduce this life-saving technology in all the countries of the Caribbean. This leads me to my second point on the vaccine readiness assessment tool. WHO, UNICEF, Gavi, and partners are working together to help prepare countries to be ready. They've recently published a set of guidelines and vaccine readiness assessment tool, which is available online. This tool is intended to be used by ministries of health with support from PAHO, WHO, and UNICEF as a roadmap for countries to plan for COVID-19 vaccine introduction and a structured framework for the countries to self-monitor their readiness progress against the key milestones. Also, as you'll later learn from my colleagues, my PAHO colleagues, Desiree and Jose Luis, PAHO has also created working groups that are developing additional tools and guidelines with the same purpose in mind, but tailor-made for the Americas and also for the Caribbean. One of the areas that is key for readiness and that is being discussed and addressed in all these initiatives is the one that we'll be discussing today, which is the safety surveillance of these vaccines. And about safety surveillance, we all know that safety is a key consideration with any health technology that will be administered to millions of people. And with the vaccine, the aim is to reach 2 billion people. Any future vaccine will have to prove to be safe and effective in its clinical trials so that regulatory agencies and WHO can recommend or authorize them for use. We still have to be vigilant as to identify in a timely manner any adverse effect that may occur only when the vaccine is being widely used. For this, countries will need to ensure that they have, 1, guidelines and procedures in place to conduct vaccine pharmacovigilance. 2, the competent and trained staff to perform the vaccination and vigilance activities. 3, establish coordination mechanisms between relevant stakeholders. And 4, clear communication channels with regional and sub-regional partners, as well as with the public to combat any misinformation on the vaccine safety that may lead to vaccine hesitancy. I hope that this dialogue today will help us to learn more from one another, and that it'll be one of the many future conversations on how the Caribbean can better prepare itself to have robust and reliable monitoring systems for vaccine safety, as well as programs that inspire the necessary confidence for a successful vaccination campaign that can keep the Caribbean safe. Thank you again for spending your time with us, and we look forward to your feedback and to your thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Shetani, for those very profound remarks and also setting the tone for the webinar for us. We will now get to what everyone has been waiting to hear from our three speakers in addressing the key topics of this webinar. I will just to reiterate with everyone that this webinar aims to identify the health systems elements and approaches needed for CARICOM governments to effectively monitor the safety of COVID-19 vaccines, identify areas for collaboration among stakeholders. And so the key topics that we will cover here today are, of course, the need for vaccine safety surveillance, irrespective of source, system requirements for such surveillance, the need for collaboration as identified before, experiences and lessons learned from previous pandemics for immunization programs, and lastly but not least, the role of the CARPHA CRS in supporting vaccine safety surveillance in the Caribbean. First, just a few housekeeping. I invite you to post your general queries or comments in the chat. And if you have questions specific to the information being presented by our speakers, to use the Q&A function. Both of these can be found at the bottom of your screen, and we will indicate as appropriate whether it would be answered by the speakers or if it would be answered by our support staff. We know that you may have questions on access and distribution of vaccines. We know that guidance for this is still being finalized, but rest assured that this important topic will be addressed in future webinars by CARPHA and PAHO. And so I now introduce our first speaker, Dr. Jose Luis Castro, who is from Argentina, and he has extensive experience over the years as PAHO advisor for medicines, vaccines, and other health technologies. And he will be presenting on health system requirements for effective vaccine safety surveillance and the need for collaboration. Dr. Castro, I invite you to share your presentation and turn over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that you are now seeing the presentation. Let me put it in presentation mode. Yes, are you able to see it?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you all. Thank you all for attending and coming to share in this meeting some concepts and approaches to the forthcoming vaccines on COVID-19, for COVID-19, and the evaluation of their safety and the preparedness. I think that we have to be very thankful for being invited to share these comments and these initiatives from PAHO that are not initiatives from PAHO, but really initiatives from the countries, as it was perfectly addressed in the previous comments and the introduction. We will be mentioning the working groups and the main and key aspects that countries are developing together with PAHO for this preparedness. First of all, I would like to again thank you all, thank for the coordinators for inviting us, and of course also mention that I will be developing a context of what are the options and where vaccines are right now, and also what are the tools that we have available and what are the challenges for this preparedness, and just introducing very briefly the working groups that countries and PAHO are being, where PAHO and countries are working together. And then my colleague Desiree will be going more in depth in some safety issues and activities under these working groups. So thank you very much. we need to have in mind that um, just as a context, that when the pandemic of H1N1 influenza, there was, and I'm sorry for some of you, and I'm thinking for example of Rian, I have mentioned this many times, but not all have heard this. A work published in The Lancet estimated through a modeling, through different studies, that 300,000 people had died because of the first year of influenza. And now, with data from yesterday in the WHO side, we have an amount of almost 4 times these deaths. And some models also estimate that this could be around 8 to 12 or 14 times the death if quarantine has not been in place. So for both those mentioning that this is just a small cold or an influenza, or saying that the quarantine measures had no effect, but indeed it has been an experiment because it was the first time of taking something like that. But we have to be aware that this virus was challenging, and some of the things the world has developed were useful. And there are many challenges regarding preparedness for vaccines. And I begin by saying that we know, and you know, that there are several platforms for developing the vaccines. These platforms are ways of developing the vaccines. And so these pose some challenges. Some of these platforms are quite new. We speak a little about that later. We also have the determination and the evaluation of IFI and ISIs, adverse events of special interest, that are those like, for example, enhanced disease, or disseminated intravascular coagulopathy, or heart attacks that are useful for estimating background rates and assess if the introduction of vaccines can increase these rates. These are events that are linked to the disease itself, and that may also be linked to the vaccination. We have some IFI also to take into account from the ongoing studies, like, for example, not exactly IFI, but some hints for taking into account that we have to have a special focus on key issues that have to call our attention, like the fact that 1/3 of the people vaccinated when one of the vaccines require, not taking acetaminophen, develop moderate or severe chills, fatigue, headaches, etc. Yes, so this is alerting us, or not alerting, but just telling us that we need to put attention to the fact that this vaccine will probably require a co-administration of some medicines. Yes. We also have to take into account that for the preparedness, we have to strengthen our passive surveillance systems, probably addressing or focusing the systems in populations, or in the assessment according to the information we have from the ongoing studies and the Brighton collaboration, which provides us with key useful information and definitions, to follow up through the passive systems, focus populations or focus clusters. We also would probably need to establish background rates in these events that I mentioned to assess if there are changes with the introduction of the vaccine. And of course, all the regulatory procedures that were also mentioned in our introduction of this talk here about authorization, which will not be a classical licensing of vaccine, batch release, etc. I want to go quickly on this because we don't have a lot of time, but just to remind of the mechanism of the infection of the virus that link to the angiotensin converting enzyme 2 in the cell, then replicates and then liberates a lot of viruses and particles that are captured by the antigen presenting cell, and then through T helper cells are stimulated, B cells and cytotoxic T cells are stimulated to provoke the production of anti-coronavirus antibody or the destruction of cells that are infected. Taking this into account, we have what called the platforms for vaccines, and we have the weakened virus vaccines, the inactivated virus vaccines, or indeed the weakened virus platform, not vaccines. This is the way of designing the vaccine. You know what is the weakened virus and the inactivated virus. I'm not going to go further on that, but there are some candidates with this approach, and mainly difference among them are the adjuvant. The adjuvant is a key issue to take into account. Some vaccines will be coming with a separated adjuvant, and so it's something to have an eye on this, yes? And some of the main risks, you know, is a return of virulence to the weakened virus. We have the nucleic acid vaccines, DNA and RNA. There are like 10 or more now vaccines undergoing through this design or platform. And the risks are, of course, in the site of injection, immune-mediated inflammation and response, but also this may extrapolate to a more deep systemic response, or the not proven but potential risk of integration of DNA into the cell. It has not happened up to now, but this is something that we have to take into account as a potential possibility to keep an eye on. The other source of design are the viral vectors vaccines, where a viral entity is used and is well attenuated to count and is the genome of codifying for the mainly for the spike protein of the coronavirus vaccine is introduced, and then this virus either replicates, and we have there the replicating viral vector, or just is introduced in the organism in the human body to induce the immune response that we have already described. And the potential risk of this is, again, the different components in the processes, the different components that may be not only the adenovirus that is the source, for example, for most of these vaccines, if it can return to virulence, or it can somehow have a different behavior of what is expected. Again, the theoretical risk of mutagenesis due to the DNA integration. This is always a risk that has not been proven again up to now in studies, but we have to keep in mind that this way of producing vaccines are quite recent, not completely new, but not so old as the inactivated or attenuated virus vaccines. And we have also the protein-based vaccines, where the spike protein or the capsule of the virus is administered to the body to generate the immune response. And this sort of platforms usually require more than one doses of vaccines to stimulate the response. Okay, this was a brief presentation of the platforms, and here we have the just don't take time in reading all what is there. Just in the back, we have 60 years for development of polio vaccines, and we are having here now for the coronavirus vaccine, like maybe 12, 18, or even 24 months. This is a huge improvement in development. Yeah. And we have here some classification of the vaccines that are undergoing. You don't need to have there in what phase they are right now, but just to mention that we have DNA, RNA, and probably you have here about the Moderna vaccine, an RNA vaccine, or the Sanofi vaccine, which is a protein vaccine. Of course, you have heard about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which is a viral vaccine. What is expected for the deployment? You have probably have heard, and I'm not going to take a long way, but the possibility for 2021 having covered 20% of the population and going through escalation from health workers in the first place, that is estimated to be 3%, to a second phase with elderly people and adults with comorbidities. And finally, getting to a broader spectrum of the population. But estimations provided that through the mechanism of the ACT accelerator, which is an international mechanism, and the COVAX mechanism that has also been referred here, we will have a coverage of 20% of the population. And this is independent, of course, of the agreements that country develop with the manufacturers. We have some regulatory considerations and challenges then for this, and there has been an agreement in meetings of the regulatory authorities that there is a need of implementing emergency use authorization processes. These emergency use authorization processes are not the classical licensing processes, as you perfectly know. I don't have to mention this. And the process is based on regulatory reliance strategies. We will mention after some tools for evaluating this. This has to be considered in the national plans, addressing the weaknesses for this and the gaps for addressing this. Implementing post-authorization surveillance and reporting as part of vaccine deployment. There is a commitment in the deployment of vaccines through COVAX to implement, because it's key to implement post-authorization surveillance. And this is not an option in the state that vaccines are being developed, and the questions that can arise from safety, we have to have systems in place, both passive and active. And as per responsibility defined in the National Pandemic Preparedness Plan, have a national immunization plan and preparedness. We have a lot of tools. This is not important. It's just a reference for guidelines to plan for COVID vaccine introduction. This has been published by PAHO, and we have there some technical components and the operational components. So it's a good tool. You have that on the right, a good tool for having a clear understanding of the steps of the requirements for preparedness. We have many documents, both in English and Spanish, not only for PAHO and WHO. I'm just putting here some of the documents. This is also a post-authorization surveillance of medical products during a pandemic emergency, another document that PAHO issued, and the manual for the vigilance of IFIs in the region of the Americas that is going to be launched soon. This is an updated manual, and Desiree will be going further on this. As was mentioned in the introduction also by our PAHO representative, there is a tool that has been shared, the Vaccine Introduction Readiness Assessment Tool by ART, and we have also there some questions and some key points to let us check whether we have this in place or not. So we recommend this, and afterwards we will be talking about some coordination that we might have to develop this. Yes, this tool has 9 components and allows to establish if the component is either not started, in progress, or completed. Yes, for during a period of time, we can plan for evaluation in October, November, for example, December, etc. We have many also through these documents. I was mentioning the PAHO document, where we have clear points to address and clear indications on what topics should be in place as part of the preparedness for vaccine. And we have, for example, prior to licensing, indeed, this is not licensing, this is authorization, marketing, no marketing, it's a use authorization, an emergency use authorization. And we have there the clinical trial protocols, the endpoints, the risk management plans, identification of ISI to be followed after the authorization, the benefit risk assessment evaluation, where the data, what would be the data sources, where are the contribution of the different actors, and what will be the strategies if there are some for injury compensation, for example. Yes, there are a lot of topics for each of the steps. For example, then again, this is the usual requirements, but we have there, instead of licenses, use authorization, and the specification for the vaccine product, the pharmacovigilance plans per vaccine product, etc. We have other tools also in the vaccine world of COVID now, and this is a landscape. This is the draft landscape of WHO, updated for November 3rd, where you have there the vaccines platform, the type of candidate vaccines, the number of doses that are required, the timing of doses, route administration, and the clinical stage with the studies that have been performed and published supporting this clinical stage. So there you have, we have a good source of information. But apart from that, we are going to develop, if you allow me to say, a more evolution dashboard, assessing some key topics regarding points to follow up or that can lead to risks, yeah, in the evaluation of these vaccines. You have another tracker. Even the New York Times have a very basic tracker. This is a tracker. When you hear a vaccine tracker, it doesn't mean the same for everybody. The information under each tracker is very different. We have there, for example, this is the last update of also of November 3rd, and it's 6 vaccines in phase 3. Yep. We have many tools, as I mentioned, and now we have a tool under consultation, which is a safety surveillance manual for vaccines for COVID-19 that was developed by WHO with regional collaborations. You have there in the web page, Rian sent you an email for for sending this sort of consultation and for stimulating your participation with comments on this consultation. What are countries together with PAHO developing? Well, we are developing the work of preparedness for vaccine surveillance under 5 groups, 5 working groups. One of the groups, and these groups are integrated by PAHO staff and also staff from the countries, and also from immunization, experts from immunization programs and national regulatory authorities. And even from some, with some people of technologies, IT, from IT, yeah. We have now 5 groups. Desiree will be addressing some more in depth, some key points about this. But one of the group is has as a name to technically support regulatory processes for the adequate introduction and monitoring of the safety of COVID vaccines. There is a second group for development of the regional surveillance standard operating procedures, including the regional database for that. A third group for strengthening IFI's national surveillance capacities with training and preparing for the manual management, the manual that I mentioned of IFIs. A fourth group to define the model of operation for the Sentinel network of active surveillance and research on COVID vaccine safety that I mentioned. That is a key issue for the forthcoming vaccines. And the fifth component that is intended to define the regional strategy to be supported by strategic alliances and effective crisis communication. And this group is particularly led by our bosses, both from the immunization unit, Dr. Cuauhtemoc Ruiz, and the chief unit of the medicines and health technologies, Analia Porras. The general objective, I think I have yet a couple of minutes according to my time, but the general objective of the group one, and I'm going to go a little more in depth of the group one, technical support regulatory processes, and the adequate introduction of monitoring of safety of vaccines for COVID-19, has a series of activities. Each group has a series of activities, and each activity is being developed by a group of people. Yeah. So among the big group, we have split in some activities, and each activity is being developed with a calendar, with a time frame by a group of people. The activity one is to develop a board or a dashboard for monitoring vaccine risk and the evolution of clinical trials and the safety profiles. That was, I mentioned, we are developing a dashboard, a regional dashboard that will assess the key issues about vaccines, like were mentioned in another dashboards, doses, requirements, administration, but also other topics like the potential risks that are being assessed in studies, or potential or data that may generate potential concerns, even no risks. So we will be trying, with the collaboration with the Epistemonicos Foundation, to assess from all the information undergoing what are these key issues. We will also be, through activity 2, defining the key IFI and ISI of Brighton collaboration that would help assessing and focusing the vigilance, both passive and active. A regional mapping of emergency procedures. This activity 3 is linked with activity 6, indeed, the support national regulatory authorities in vaccine introduction mechanism. This is a subgroup of the group that is leading with now a mapping of capacities for assessing and for quick introduction of vaccines through emergency procedures. There is a mapping now, and there will be a set of the recommendations developed for the beginning of the year about things to improve in the countries, things to share within countries that are being successful in terms of incorporation of the vaccine, lot release, management quality procedures, regulatory issues in general. The group 4 is a group that is intending to map also what is happening with the clinical trials regarding vaccines and how to get reports and evaluation of, this is group 5. The group 5 is regarding evaluation of clinical trials and the report of unexpected adverse events or events in general, what are the procedures in countries and what can be improved. And the group 4, going back, sorry for that, is the strategy for requesting the procedures and the key issues to be considered in a PCOR, periodic safety update report, or risk management plans of vaccines for COVID. And proposing for March next year a joint evaluation of some documents regarding these joint documents among countries. We have already had this experience in the region. Okay, what are the next steps then? Well, it's important to have the country's task force in place and with some, as the following point says, to develop the national and regional preparedness plans. So a task force and a plan, and Desiree will be expanding some of these topics to coordinate among the immunization programs and the national regulatory authorities. This is a key point. Some of the countries have still separated issues. This is a team approach. This cannot be done just by one. This is a collaboration requirement for the immunization program and the national regulatory authority. And we have to be very clear with that. This is a requirement, it's not an option. To generally discuss the proposals for passive and active pharmacovigilance, and Desiree will be mentioning that in her presentation, and developing of the regional surveillance system, as I have already mentioned, that also Desiree will be commenting. And of course, from your side, the coordination of CARPHA CRS, not only among countries, but also with the whole region and the world. Yeah, because this is a world initiative. We could not be able to develop active surveillance with useful results without multi-country collaboration. And so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Castro, for that very informative presentation. I will now introduce our next presenter, Dr. Desiree Pastor. Dr. Pastor is a Honduran and a medical doctor with a master's degree in public health with minor in epidemiology. Dr. Pastor graduated from a biostatistics diplomate and postgraduate certificate in international health, and she has a long career, over 35 years, with the immunization program of PAHO, since the polio eradication in the Ministry of Health of Honduras, and during the last 22 years, working for over 35 years with the immunization program since the polio eradication in the Ministry of Health of Honduras, and during the last 22 years with PAHO as an immunization advisor for several countries, including Colombia, El Salvador, Bolivia, and Venezuela. Currently, Dr. Pastor is a regional immunization advisor for measles, rubella, and elimination, and the focal point for the ESAVI surveillance in the immunization unit of PAHO WHO in Washington, D.C. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Pastor.
Thank you, Enid, for your introduction. So first, I would like to thank our organizers, the Executive Director of CARPHA, Dr. Joy St. John, and also to our PAHO Caribbean Sub-Regional Program Coordinator, Mrs. Jessie Schutain, for inviting me to present the topic of the events supposedly attributed to vaccination or immunization that we call ESAVI in the Americas, which is the equivalent of AFI, or adverse event following immunization, which is better known at the international level, and the role of immunization programs in vaccine safety surveillance in the Americas. The next, please. So I'm going to focus in the first two topics of my presentation, which are the WHO surveillance of adverse events following the immunization, which is known as AFI, and the background of ESAVI surveillance in the Americas. The next one, please. So every year, all the countries report the most important immunization data to WHO and UNICEF through the joint reporting form, well known as GRF. So among this data, the countries report a few variables related with adverse events following to immunization, AFI. In 2018, as you can see in different colors in these maps, I present the source of data of those reports. For instance, The countries in green color are those where the immunization program is the main source of data, which is equivalent is 40% of the countries in the world. In purple are the countries where the National Regulatory Authority is the source, which represent the 13%. In blue, the countries where both EPI, or the immunization program, and National Regulatory Authority report jointly, which is the 23% of the countries. And in orange, for those countries with a different source than EPI or NRI, which represent the 13%. The next one, please. During the same year, in 2018, you can see in the graph at your left, countries reported the number of serious AFI in purple bars and non-serious AFI in yellow bars. At the right end on the graph, you can see that there are many countries that didn't report AFI cases during 2018. In the graph at your right, you see those AFI in an annual rate per 100,000 surviving infants that must be accomplished at least at 10 AFI by 100,000 surviving infants. So the countries under the red line didn't accomplish this performance surveillance indicator. And I would like to tell you that this indicator, the performance of annual rate of AFI reported per 100,000 surviving infants, will be one of the indicators that will be monitored during the COVID-19 vaccines introduction. The next one. A second global mechanism to report AFI is the WHO Global Medicine Safety BG-base. The most of you know very well. 136 countries contribute to this database, and over 21 million reports of suspected adverse drug reactions, or ADR, known as individual case safety reports, ICSR, have been reported since 1968. BG Access is a database that allows you to browse and view data on suspected side effects from various medicinal products, also known as suspected adverse drug reactions. All data contained here is sourced from BG-base, the WHO global database for these adverse drug reactions, maintained by the Uppsala Monitoring Center, the UMC, which is the WHO Collaborating Center for the International Drug Monitoring Base in Uppsala, Sweden. The next one, please. The structure of the WHO Global Pharmacovigilance Reporting System is based on the individual case safety reports, as you can see at the left of your of this chart. So a standardized form that can be filled by a patient or by the Minister of Health, the immunization program, or the National Regulatory Authority, or drugs and vaccines manufacturers and other institutions. So all of them can fill the form of the ICSR. The form is sent to a national pharmacovigilance center, and from here, the data is coded using the standardized dictionaries and entered into BG flow system to be received by the BG base at the Uppsala Medical Center. The next one, please. So going to the general background of SAVI surveillance in the Americas, there are successful experiences in monitoring the SAVIs in our region between 2002 and 2016, in which PAHO has responded to specific situations. For instance, we have conducted many national workshops for vaccine safety training since that year, but we also have conducted the regional workshops for expected SAVIs attributed to the influenza H1N1 vaccine during the pandemic in between 2009 and 2010. We also conducted a regional workshop for expected SAVIs attributed to yellow fever vaccine in 2012. You can remember that with this vaccine, we have a multi-organ failure because the yellow fever vaccine reactions, and a project of WHO Global Vaccine Safety Multi-Country Collaboration, which was conducted between 2014 and 2016 in our region with support of many actors in this project. So the passive surveillance of ESAVI has been carried out differently in each country. Some of them only carry out surveillance during the national vaccination campaigns, or when serious events were reported during the routine immunization program. The coordination between immunization and pharmacovigilance has been sporadical for serious events. And this is something that we as PAHO wish to strengthen in the future months and years, as Jose Luis Castro has highlighted in the previous presentation. The next one, please. However, in 2018, we as PAHO realized that we needed a regional ESAVI surveillance system, and we started with a project to update the PAHO regional manual for ESAVI surveillance, which has been adapted from the WHO global manual, which has launched in 2016. A technical and financial agreement between PAHO and CDC has been the main motor for driving this ambitious project. Since then, we have convened 3 meetings with many experts from PAHO, CDC, WHO, and countries like Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Peru, Mexico, and the United States. So these meetings were done in Colombia, Chile, and the last one in PAHO, Washington, the last February of this year, very close on the days when the pandemic of the COVID was declared. The next one, please. So, but let's go to the main point of my presentation, which is the PAHO Regional Surveillance System of ESAVI, the vision and objectives, and what are our proposal, challenges, and strategies in the context of the new COVID-19 vaccines introduction. The next one, please. So the ESAVI surveillance is one more element within the cycle of actions to have a safe vaccination, and therefore it must be seen in a broader context within an interprogrammatic work, which includes some actions like the maintenance of the cold chain and appropriate storage of vaccine and syringes supplies, other supplies, and the training and supervision of vaccination teams. This is very important to avoid the programmatic errors on vaccination. The injection safety management component, and of course, the passive and active ESAVI surveillance, the purchase of safe vaccines through the PAHO revolving fund, and strengthening the national regulatory authorities aspects, among others. In this cycle, PAHO has the enormous challenge of designing and implementing a regional ESAVI surveillance system, work that has been carried out in the last 2 years with the technical and financial support of the CDC and WHO, as I have mentioned before. The next one, please. Our vision. So the PAHO vision is to achieve a sensitive, timely, standardized, reliable, and integrated regional surveillance system with the co-participation of all actors involved in vaccine safety in order to maintain the confidence and acceptance of the immunization in the Americas. And the general objective is to contribute to early detection and classification of serious ESAVIs and risk signals to generate a rapid and appropriate response at national and regional level. It is important to mention now that also this system is going to be released with the surveillance of ESAVIs by vaccines against COVID-19. The general objective is to cover ESAVIs by any vaccine of the national immunization schedule in our countries. So the next one, please. So we have specific objectives in the context of the COVID-19 vaccine introduction. The first one is to obtain and analyze the information in a real time for decision making, identifying the different types of ESAVI that has been approved at the global level. The first one is the vaccine product related reactions. The second is the vaccine quality defect reaction. And the third one is the immunization error related reaction. The fourth is the immunization anxiety related reaction. And the last one is the coincidental event with temporal association to vaccination, what during the routine immunization program, these are the most frequent ESAVI that we have been observed. The second specific objective is to design and implement the vaccine safety surveillance through intensify passive surveillance, active surveillance as well, and if we can, also conduct special studies related to the new vaccine, to the new COVID-19 vaccine introduction. The third one is to coordinate actions with the PAHO Revolving Fund due to the ESAVIs related to quality defects of COVID-19 vaccines. And this is very important because as Jose Luis already mentioned, and also Dr. Joy and Dr. Jesse, the vaccines will come to the Americas through a mechanism that is COVAX, where the revolving fund will be also an actor, an important actor in the allocation of these vaccines. The fourth one is to inform the countries on a regular basis on the regional data to maintain the acceptance of vaccines. We don't want that because any ESAVI or problem with the new COVID-19 vaccines introduction, the whole immunization program will be affected in any way. So the next one, please. So in order to meet the objectives of our regional ESAVI surveillance system regarding the introduction of these new vaccines, we have 5 major challenges for which we will be applying the recommendations issued by the WHO and the Global Advisory Committee for Vaccine Safety, known as GAPS, in the new Global Safe Vaccination Manual for COVID-19 vaccines that Jose Luis already chose in his screen, and also with the PAHO regional manual and the technical guidelines that we will publish and will be finalized in the early 2021. So the first challenge is to strengthening the regulatory aspects before COVID-19 vaccines introduction, as you can see. The second one is to strengthening the national capacities for ESAVI surveillance in tandem with a regional surveillance information system. All the standard operational procedures has to be developed, and also manuals for the healthcare work use. The third one is to creating virtual tools for training in surveillance. So this challenge has to be done through web courses, webinars, workshops for improving detection, notification, investigation, the causality assessment, and call for action. The fourth challenge is to conduct the active surveillance for adverse events of special interest that are related with the COVID disease as it, and also the ESAVI that will be related with the introduction of the vaccine. And this challenge also include to develop special studies to have the statistical association between vaccination and some serious ESAVIs as well. And the fifth one, and no less important, is to prepare a social communication strategy for the vaccine introduction. The next one, please. So to address the first challenge on the regulatory mechanism for the COVID-19 vaccines introduction, as Jose Luis already has mentioned, and he has been very granular in the description of all these activities. There are some experts from PAHO and many countries that are working to meet several products. I am not going to be in detail because Jose Luis already have described very well all of them. So I am going to go to the second strategy. Next one, please. So a second working group of experts is working to develop the standard operational procedures for the regional surveillance system. And this includes the design, validation, and support the implementation of a regional survey. So many of you already have participated in the interview and also in the field of the survey that has been done through an electronic survey. The second product of this working group is to process, analyze, and consolidate the results of this regional survey. The third one is to document standard operational procedures. This will be very important because this will be the vertebral column, not the spine core in the regional system to support the transfer of the information from the national level to the regional level. And four is the definition, a model, and project of a regional information system for the ESAVI surveillance. So this includes the business rules of the information system, the architecture, the evaluation of digital tools, and of course, the estimation of the implementation and operational cost. The next one, please. So a third working group of experts is working to develop the training tools to strengthen the national capacities in ESAVI and the ASI surveillance, which includes the edition, translation, publication, and launching of the ESAVI Regional Surveillance Manual that I have already mentioned that this manual has been adapted from the global WHO Global Manual of Surveillance. The second one is the preparation of the virtual course for the ESAVI Surveillance Manual, because in this pandemic context, all the tools has to be done in a virtual manner. So we pretend to use the virtual campus of the PAHO for having or for using the tools in all the countries with any difficulty. And of course, we need to prepare to publish and implement at least 3 case studies of adequate management of ESAVIs using the WHO investigation and the causality assessment tools that WHO already has launched. And 4 is the preparation of an ESAVI surveillance training strategy to strengthen the national capacities. So I already mentioned that this is aimed to strengthen the investigation, the causality assessment, and all other activities that the national committees for ESAVI will be involved and will be need in terms to do a right causality assessment and classification of all the ESAVIs in place. The next one, please. A fourth working group of experts is working to define the functional model of the Sentinel network of active surveillance for the safety of COVID-19 vaccines, as well as the ESAVI and ASI research protocol. And this includes the exchange of lessons learned and best practices from PAHO Sentinel surveillance project. Remember that we have many Sentinel surveillance in the past. For instance, the new vaccines are like rotavirus and pneumococcal and meningitis vaccines already have a Sentinel surveillance in place, but also influenza has the Sentinel network, and some of the Sentinel hospitals that have already conducted the influenza or the SARI surveillance, they are also conducting the COVID surveillance as well. So maybe this PAHO Sentinel surveillance could be useful for install also the ESAVI and ASI surveillance in them. The second one is the identification of as a standard protocol for a Sentinel network of active surveillance. And in this way, we also have seen that the following of the pregnant women that have been vaccinated inadvertently because they didn't knew that they were pregnant and they have been vaccinated. For instance, healthcare workers that will be the first group that will be vaccinated. They could be women that are pregnant, and we need to be ready to have the Sentinel surveillance in place to follow these women in the CLAP Sentinel sites that are already functioning in some countries. And also we pretend to have the readiness capacity of the countries based on the indicators that we will propose in analysis plan. This is very important because the management plan is very important to support the monitoring and evaluation of the performance of the Sentinel network in place, or another methodologies for active surveillance that could be, for instance, the cohorts event monitoring, or other methodologies in place that could be even special studies for control studies that will be in place. Everything has to have management plans. And so I am going to move to the fifth one. I think this is the last one. Yes, so and a fifth working group of experts is working to establish a regional committee for vaccine safety with the support of strategic alliances and the strategic communication plan, which will also cover the crisis for ESAVI. And this working group is working to achieve some products like the participation of PAHO in WHO, like the GAPS and SAGE working groups. This is very important. We already have participated in many of these meetings, and now all the manuals and recommendations coming from GAPS and SAGE will be published very soon. The second one is the preparation, the approval, and the delivery of the terms of reference for the regional committee on vaccine safety. This will be very important because we will have our main partners and academic and scientific partners as well, and also the technical advisory group for the immunopreventable diseases, the TAC members, the CDC, the FDA of the United States, the Global Vaccine Data Net, that is also a global alliance, Brighton collaboration, and many of the immunization and authority regulatory, national regulatory authorities in the countries, and of course, some universities and other individual experts as well. The third product of this working group is to develop and to deploy the risk social communication materials related to ESAVI that many of them are already done and will be published very soon. And finally, the preparation of webinars, videos, the frequent answer and questions, workshops for social risk communications as message as well. The next one. So finally, this is not the less important, but PAHO has adapted the WHO tool for the vaccine introduction readiness self-assessment. This is a tool for a checklist, and is known as BIRAT, or BIRAT for its acronym in English. Jose Luis already mentioned that the component of the regulatory aspects, which is the number C, and also the safety and surveillance, which is the letter H, are two of the 9 components of this tool that now is very well known at the country levels. All the countries will use this this tool for evaluating and monitoring the readiness for the COVID-19 vaccine introduction. So I could give more details during the session of discussion, and my last comment is to remember that working joint the immunization program and the national regulatory authorities will give us the great opportunity to work with others to defeat this virus as we have done in the past with the vaccination against other immunopreventable diseases like polio, measles, rubella, smallpox, and others. And we can defeat this virus with vaccination and other strategies, the test, the social distance, and other social measures that have to be done for the whole population. So thank you, and thank you for your time, and I will be able to respond your questions in the upcoming sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pastor, for giving that very insightful overview of some of the challenges that we currently face, but also in addition, some of the solutions and strategies that are currently being implemented in the region. I reminding our participants that please utilize the Q&A feature, which is below your screen, to enter your questions when we are ready to move to the Q&A portion of the webinar. I will now introduce our next presenter, Dr. Rian Marie Extavour. Dr. Extavour is the technical coordinator of the Caribbean Regulatory System, our sister medicines unit, and she has been instrumental in establishing the Caribbean Network for Pharmacovigilance and Post-Market Surveillance, which I know many of our member states are familiar with as VigiCarib under CARPHA CRS. Dr. Extavour's experience and training spans pharmacy practice, academia, pharmacy administration, regulatory affairs, and pharmacovigilance. She oversees the revision and implementation of operational procedures of the CRS and is the editor of the VigiCarib's monthly newsletter. Thank you very much, Dr. Extavour, and over to you.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm going to find back my slide set. And good afternoon, all. Thank you for joining us at today's webinar, and I'll go straight into it. So I will be introducing you to or reminding you, depending on where you sit, on how CARPHA CRS's regional network for pharmacovigilance and post-market surveillance can support the vaccine safety surveillance in the region, and how we are positioned to assist and to support accordingly. So this is an overview of the main areas I'll speak to. I won't read that out because we are short on time. And as Nicole mentioned earlier, we have two main medicines units that support regulation of medicines in CARPHA, and the Medicines Quality Control and Surveillance Department is what we used to call the drug testing lab, and they deal with medicines quality testing, but they also have a post-market surveillance program for medicines in the region. And the Caribbean Regulatory System, where I sit, we have two main functions. One relates to making recommendations for market authorization using regulatory reliance, and that includes emergency use reviews for medicines, vaccines, and in vitro diagnostics that have received emergency use authorization by recognized authorities. So we apply reliance for that procedure as well, and we anticipate that where needed, that could be applied to the vaccine process. But the part that we want to speak to today is how the regional network, or VigiCarib, works to support regional surveillance of safety as well as quality issues that we encounter with not just medicines, but also vaccines and other devices in the region. So at this point in time, how we work is that we have focal points in the various medicines regulatory authorities, the national authorities, or ministries of health, as you may call it. And those focal points would share reports that they've received from healthcare professionals or from market authorization holders, what we sometimes call sponsors or pharmaceutical companies, or from patients. And they share it in an anonymized format, so we don't know who the person involved is, but we get an idea of the medicines involved and the types of reactions that have been suspected. In some cases, there are countries that already have membership with the WHO Program for International Drug Monitoring, and they can report directly into VGBs, as Desiree mentioned. However, where we have countries that may not have that capacity or in-house hands-on, we assist to be a conduit for reporting into VGBs. So that way, we're not just collecting information on what's happening in the region, we're also sharing for international surveillance, which helps with signals, and it helps with quality issues because the global surveillance and monitoring system also receives reports from our member states or from us where we can assist, and that helps with issuing rapid alerts from the World Health Organization. Every month we issue a newsletter called VGCarib News, so that our focal points in the network can see where these case reports have come from, the types of the age groups of patients who were affected, and as well as the types of reactions or quality issues. And that's growing because we also add regulatory updates to it. So they can go back to their ministers, to their CMOs and say, we've noticed this product is under investigation or is problematic in a particular country. Can we check to see if these batches are also here? And that's how we strengthen regional surveillance. So this is just a snapshot of our reporting form that's online. So there are different modes our focal points can report to us. And we also accept reports from market authorization holders. Where that happens, we would channel the reports back to our focal points so that the ministries of health, the national authorities also have an idea of what was captured in the country. When we take a look at vaccine safety surveillance and the impending vaccines, we want to continue with extend our work to that area, particularly with helping focal points with identifying and reporting of adverse events following immunizations, particularly the adverse events of special interest that would be related to COVID-19 vaccinations, and as well as quality defect related reactions. So we're not limited to these types of events. However, I wanted to just flag those. And to note that in the event that a falsified vaccine is noted or is something has been confirmed as falsified, that's an important aspect for us to share within the region, because of course, where there is demand, there are also agents who try to mimic the authentic products, and we also need to be vigilant about those. We will be position 2, we can provide feedback on our case reports for completeness to focal points. So if there's a particular report that's shared and the agent or the focal point person is not clear on how to assess causality, we can assist in that regard and continue our conveyance of reports to both regional and international surveillance systems through PAHO, through the Uppsala Monitoring Center and the World Health Organization's Global Surveillance and Monitoring System, or the equivalent that's developed particularly for this vaccine. So we want to continue supporting regional networks, particularly when it comes to building capacity and ruling out and improving and strengthening awareness through webinars where needed, and if we need to look at regional trends. I mentioned the VGCarib newsletter, but in between, sometimes information comes to us that's really, we need to send out quickly, and we can't wait for the monthly issue to be done. And so a brief or an email will be sent with that information. And it includes links to regulatory updates that we've been getting periodically, resources to help regulators make decisions and to determine priority medicines for further vigilance, as well as resources for capacity building. So it may include links to courses, and we intend to also flag any vaccine confidence campaigns that are developed in the region so that we highlight the work of our member states. In all, regional vigilance for the COVID-19 vaccine or vaccines is going to be critical to help us identify priority vaccines. Of course, vigilance is not limited to vaccines, but we also have medicines and devices that we will be relying on. We want to continue supporting our technical officers so they have the capacity and the tools to move forward, and the manual that will be coming out will be critical to that event or that those efforts, as well as we want to support the regulatory decision making by giving persons information, not just about what happens in your country, because we share a lot of common practices, cultural events, and responses amongst our peoples. And the activities for risk minimization would be important to learn from, so we can learn from each other, strengthen our own policy development approaches. So networking is going to be important in CARICOM, and CRS is positioned and intends to continue supporting that. So I thank you for your attention. I know I went through it pretty quickly, but just to highlight that CARPHA's COVID-19 website is dedicated to providing updates for technical guidance, situation reports, and more health rounds that may be coming up. Nicole will share an evaluation, but I'm happy that you were able to join us, and we hope to I think we're planning to do additional follow-up webinars because we know this topic is going to be important to really strengthen our focal points and to ensure our populations feel comfortable and know when, where, and how to report. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Extavour, for giving a good overview of how CARPHA through the CRS can help to support vaccine safety surveillance in the region. We are now at the stage of our Q&A, and so we will be putting forth some questions to our distinguished panelists to answer. And I will start with Dr. Castro, Dr. Extavour, in terms of how do you foresee that CARPHA and PAHO can provide training and support to strengthen national capacities for surveillance?
I allow Rian perhaps to go in the first place. And I don't know, Desiree, if you want to intervene, please.
Well, I will start off the ball rolling with that one. From what there is planned in terms of the strategic approach for ISAVI and regional surveillance, there will be a need for us to develop webinars and opportunities so that our focal points and those working in the key areas can have an idea of the steps involved. So Desiree mentioned the standard operating procedures, but also educational tools based on the manual. Desiree?
Yes, thank you. I think that we are going to finish and to conclude the working group's products at the end of January. So we pretend to have a regional meeting, including all the subregions, the Caribbean English subregion as well. So in this meeting, we are going to launch not just the regional manual for ISAVI surveillance, but also we pretend to launch the protocols for active surveillance as well, and also the tools that we are going to promote for the investigation and classification of the SAVI according with the WHO guidelines. So these tools will be translated in many languages, English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, of course. So I think this will be very useful for strengthening the coordination between CARPHA, PAHO, and immunization and national regulatory authorities as well.
Yeah, thank you. In addition to that, and let me the camera. Sorry. In addition to that, yes, there is a need of a coordinated response, but mainly, and I think that for Caribbean countries, what Desiree and Rian were mentioning, the planning and the development of the coordination through CRS, CARPHA, of the group that would be developing the plan. As you have seen, there are many components. It's not so easy. Countries are working together with PAHO in developing each of the components that Desiree and I briefly described also, but there are many components for preparedness, and is a need to have them in order to have them prioritized according to the gaps and to the strengths that countries have. So it's important to coordinate that through a plan and through the coordination of CARPHA, CRS, task force.
Can I say something?
Yes, please go ahead, Dr. St. John.
No, it's just to support Rian, because this series that we're doing, the COVID health rounds, we can do a series for persons who need to have something unpacked. So we can do, for example, 3 or 4 sessions. So we widen the reach. And the other thing that I think is going to be useful for the member states, because this is a bit of complex stuff, I think it would be good if we could do some sort of joint companion manual or something like that, so that some of these issues aren't just answered one-off, but we give them something written that they can refer to, a flow chart, something like that. I find that when we've been starting off with new vaccines or procedures, it's always helpful to have something like this to support the member states.
Certainly.
Thank you very much for that intervention, Dr. St. John. I now put to the panelists the first of 2 questions coming from our participants. Will private hospitals be utilized as part of the distribution network for administration of the COVAX vaccine when ready?
I think that Dr. St. John want to.
Yeah, I think that Dr. St. John has to respond that.
No, Dr. St. John was being nosy and looking at the questions. And I said to myself, this is such a nice question. I want to make sure that it is answered live. But really, I wanted to hear from both PAHO and the member states, because when you are introducing a vaccine, it depends on your country's systems if you allow the private sector to be part of the distribution, especially when we are in a situation where we have less vaccine than we normally have for many of the antigens. So I would have loved to have heard from the panel, the experts on the panel. I'm just here for decoration. I would have loved to have heard from experts on the panel as well as member states. I know what I would do if I was CMO in Barbados again, but I would love to hear what the member states and the panel have to say.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Joy. I think that PAHO is promoting the every country has to evaluate and to assess the own characteristic of the population and the health services, because it's very important, as you say, that for instance, if any country decide to allocate the vaccines, not just in the public health services, but also in the private, that's their own decision. And PAHO will be supporting anytime all the decisions that the member states have decided in that term. So even the priority groups for vaccination will be decided by the ministers of health, by the country level. PAHO will be supporting anytime. And this activity of deploy the vaccine in the private sector, that's another decision that the member states have to take in advance. I know that health services in many countries depends in many sectors of the private sector, and in other places depends on the public health services. So this will depend on the context of every country. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. I'll add some things to that comments that I fully share. It's always in the in the country's decision how things are going to implement within the borders and inside the country. But of course, there are certain commitments with the COVAX. For example, the vigilance program is a commitment for the deployment of vaccines through COVAX to guarantee an access to vaccines of part of the population. And this escalation of 3% for healthcare workers and other is a kind of agreement, if not fully, but it's fully, committed, but it's a kind of agreement of the COVAX initiative. And under this, again, each country is sovereign to do inside the country whatever estimates the best, but we have to take into account that the virus doesn't distinguish between private and public sector. And so perhaps strengthening only one sector could be not only from the point of view of the disease a problem, but also from the political point of view a problem. So again, the decision is in the country, but taking into account these elements.
Thank you very much. I will now move to the next question. Is there a vaccine for SARS-1? And is there evidence to indicate that a safe vaccine for the COVID-19 virus can be developed over the next 12 months?
Desiree, you want to go first?
No, Jose Luis, I don't have the answer. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I have been aware of just some studies beginning for SARS-1. If you refer to SARS-CoV-1, yeah, but we have to take into account that this was really very brief. The appearance and containment of SARS-CoV-1, it took like 1 year, 1.5 years. Even some cases were exported and it was more lethal than the actual COVID. It was, if we are referring again to SARS-CoV-1, no? So it was short, and the cases, I think there were around 800 or 1,000 deaths because of that. So even if being more little, and for the next vaccines, we have some hints that we are expecting, yes, in the first semester of or first trimester or semester of 2021, a vaccine for countries of the region. No?
Thank you very much, Dr. Castro. Being mindful, I will just pose 2 last questions. We've spoken a lot about the strategies that need to be put in place. And we know that it's important to have collaboration between stakeholders, between the regulatory authorities and immunization programs. So does the panel have any suggestions or recommendations for how to strengthen collaboration between those 2 key stakeholders? And if there are any other parties who would also need to be brought on board?
Thank you, Nicole. I think this is the perfect moment, the perfect historical moment in which we are now facing this pandemic with the introduction of new vaccines. And this is the perfect moment in which the immunization programs and the national regulatory authorities can work together as never have done. And I think that is very important to strengthen the mechanism for having the coordination before the vaccine introduction. For this, for instance, using the webinars, the manuals, the trainings, the workshops, along in tandem with other actors involved as well. For instance, people working in the social communication strategy. Many other actors are very closely involved with this new vaccine introduction. And I think that we need to work all together. If we want to defeat this virus, not just with vaccine, but as I told before, with other measures laboratory tests and also the treatment, the protocol, the therapeutics and the social distance, hand washing, and the PPE using the healthcare workers training. All of these measures will be allow us to defeat this virus. And of course, immunization programs and national regulatory authority have to work together. There are many, many opportunities for working together, as we are now doing in PAHO. With these working groups at the country level, they can do also the same, trying to coordinate the activities for the monitoring of the plan of for instance, the BIDAT tool, no? This readiness assessment tool. If both programs work together doing the monitoring of this is the first step for achieving a strong relation between both programs. So I think we already started to do it at the regional level, and I invite the country level to do it as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, Desiree has already pointed out, I couldn't agree more with her that this is an extraordinary opportunity to have this collaboration. Many countries, as we mentioned, have had separated systems for national regulatory authorities and immunization programs. Some have already made progress for these communications, and this is what we want to set. We have at the regional level a strong group, harmonized and coordinated for this among the immunization program and the medicines and health technology unit. And we think this can be done through two approaches. One is through the trainings, through the sensitization, the manual and the tools. The manual addresses this collaboration. The manual is going to be launched, and that was led by Desiree on IFI management. And through the sensitization, through the creating awareness, the tools, the trainings, but also the tools, mainly the tools that like the manual, like the indicators, and like the regional system that are considering a joint work. If these tools don't consider a joint work of both stakeholders, then they are not going to work together. So for the regional database management, for the reporting, we are considering a joint work. For the manual, there are hints for a joint work. For the evaluation and the reporting and management and reporting to the Sala Monitoring Center, and the codification, harmonization of the sheets for reporting, there is a joint work that is considered. So practical approaches with tools, and also training for creating awareness.
Okay, thank you so much. I will just put forth one final query, and ending on this note. We have brought together our regulators, our representatives in the health ministries for this webinar. But one of the key things that everyone has noted from our welcome remarks and throughout is the importance of engaging the community and addressing some of the issues that we've seen in terms of vaccine hesitancy that may present a challenge with the introduction of a COVID-19 vaccine. So my final question to the panel is, this is one way we have brought in our regulators, but what are some of the strategies that we can employ in terms of engaging the wider community and persons who would also have an interest in terms of ensuring that we have a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, first, I think that PAHO is already developing a lot of materials in terms of social communication for the acceptance of the vaccine and to have confidence in the new vaccine. Of course, we need to be sure that all the new vaccines, the COVID new vaccines, will be safe and will be effective and we will promote all of them that have been tested and approved, of course. But we think that at the end of the day, we will need to strengthen many strategies of social communication to be sure that the people, the communities are thinking about the benefits of the vaccination in terms of defeating this virus, in terms of creating a herd immunity in the country, to take the opportunity to see that with these vaccines, they could also going ahead with the economy recovery in the countries as well. Many benefits will arrive with the introduction of the vaccines. And we will need to be aware that the safety surveillance will be in place to assure that the social communication plans will be transparent, will be honest with the population, with our communities, that they will receive the true information about the safety, the effectiveness of all the vaccines that are in every single country. So I think that PAHO will also launch many strategies. We already have very close to publish at least 2 or 3 guidance that will be useful for the healthcare workers as a hand pocket manuals. So, and also the Minister of Health could be take the opportunity to use this guidance to adapt or to adjust for their own social strategies. And also we will have a risk communication plan just to be sure that if any adverse events occurs in any country for any of these new platform vaccines, we will have in place a very timely strategy for social communication to avoid damage in the whole immunization program. Thank you.
Hi, Nicole, if I may, just to also reinforce what Desiree has said, that risk communication means we need to also engage advocacy groups, patient groups, and networks to address their issues before the vaccine arises, and to get an idea what are concerns of the persons in our individual populations. And communication needs to be regular, it needs to be timely, and needs to be accurate. And you have to continue to build trust as a regulator with the communities and with the media, and help them to see you as a trusted resource and explain as we are going, this is what we're going to be doing, what's your plan, what's your strategy, if this happens, what to do. And because a lot of fear generates from just not knowing and a lot of uncertainty. So get taken in front, basically not waiting until you say, okay, we have the vaccine now, come and get it. That governments and our ministries, we want to support them in preparing their populations to receive it, in answering their concerns and being transparent in that, and really opening up that communication, those talks among different groups that would have concerns, particularly, young women of childbearing age, pregnant women, mothers of young children, and so sometimes we may need to just have focus groups to know what are their concerns and how we're addressing it, and explain to them, how is a vaccine going to work, how is a vaccine made, and how are you ensuring safety, so that boil down to a way in which the public can understand, okay, this is what they're doing to make sure it's safe. They're going to assess risk and benefits and make sure that the ones we get, or the vaccine we get, is really the best that that will work for us. So just wanted to share that. Thanks.
There are 2 questions in the chat. Sorry, not in the chat, in the question and answer that we need to address.
Okay, so
which
thank you for
feeds into this whole need for action. I am very glad to hear PAHO say that they're doing something about letting the public know about the safety of the vaccine. So if we could deal with these questions.
Thanks very much, Dr. St. John. So, of course, coming off what we just discussed, one of our participants posed, and I will put to the panel, do you get the feeling that we appear to be test subjects for this vaccine? It seems so rushed. What about the possible side effects that are still unknown?
Well, I think that I am going to give the opportunity to Jose Luis Castro to answer as well. But in my opinion, there's a lot of uncertainty until now. We are in this historical moment, in this pandemic, we are rushing for preparing us as well, not just to see the negative aspect of the production of the vaccines, because remember that if we are prepared to have the safety surveillance in place, we could detect any problem in a timely way once the vaccines have been introduced in our countries. But I think that it's very important to all of us to know, to be honest, that at this time, with the time that the development of the vaccines, we cannot say that any vaccine is better than other one. This has to be tested during the phase 4 of the post-marketing introduction. So I would like that Jose Luis also say something about the scenarios or the settings about the pharmacovigilance aspects in which normally a vaccine could be tested or could be approved under the pharmacovigilance rules. Thank you.
Thanks, Desiree. Yes, I'm there. Yeah.
I'm going to.
Thank you. We are under an emergency. Yeah. So we have not to forget this. And under an emergency, we have to make some things more flexible, keeping standards. And that's the line. Making this flexible, but keeping minimal standards. I don't think we are going to be kind of subjects of an experiment, because some of these vaccines, so first of all, there is a need for a rush. Yes, we cannot keep forever like this. There is a need for a rush. Does it mean that we are going to approve vaccines with that are lacking evaluation of safety? No. And so some of the vaccines have been administered to many thousands of people, some of them to dozens of thousands. But this is a considerable amount of people, but might be not enough. We perfectly know that for some adverse events that are rare, but maybe quite important or serious, this is maybe not enough. So we have to trust that things are going to develop, and it looks like that, are going to develop in the right way of the evaluations. You heard that one of the trials were halted for a while until an investigation underwent about a serious adverse reaction. So you have there an example that things are being monitored. Everybody is concerned about having this enough speed to have the vaccines, but without risking the population. And of course, we are perfectly aware, and we are monitoring that, because it's not only risking the population, but risking the consideration for vaccines in all the population. Yes, so we are perfectly aware of this, what's in play here, and I think everybody is aware, not only us. And we are, and not only we, but all the regulatory authorities and those in charge of surveillance of the trials, and the Solidarity Trial is an example for vaccines where WHO is involved in developing these trials for vaccines. So everybody is following closely the effectivity and the apparition or the coming up of adverse events. Even this will pose some flexibility in terms of balanced risks when they come to the market. And we have to, that's why pharmacovigilance and vigilance is not an option, it's mandatory for this.
So I wanted to say something too, because Miri Edwards asked about the possible side effects. Now, first of all, CARPHA is on the steering committee for the WHO Solidarity Trials. And through that medium, as well as our other reviews of what is going on worldwide, we are trying to keep on top of any sorts of clinical trials of treatments or vaccines. So I am not aware of a clinical trial of vaccines in the Caribbean. So that's the first thing. So any vaccine that comes into the Caribbean is going to be coming in after it has passed several sets of layers of due diligence in trials. So anything that's coming in would be approved. The second thing is that, and I hope that we will be able to get the presentations as well as the recording. The second thing is that Jose Luis described some of the side effects that have already been seen in the vaccine trials, and they are not untoward. And he did also speak about when there were adverse reactions, the fact that the trial was stopped. The reaction has been thoroughly investigated. So I want Miri Edwards and other people who feel that the vaccine is going to be just something that hasn't been properly tested and reviewed, and it will come into the Caribbean, I want them to stop thinking that way. And we also have some other questions along those lines. There needs to be a trust that we are looking after you, the collective we, PAHO and CARPHA.
Thank you very much, Dr. St. John, Dr. Castro, Dr. Pastor, Dr. Extavour. Thank you very much for those closing comments. We now, of course, have to come to the end of our webinar. I would just open the floor for Mrs. Shutine and Dr. St. John for any brief closing remarks.
I will let our guest go first.
Miss Shutane had to leave because she had a meeting that was scheduled before, but she sends once again her appreciation for inviting PAHO to this space. It is very important for us to be able to talk about these very important topics. And Dr. St. John, again, thank you so much for allowing us to be part of the COVID-19 health rounds. And we look forward to the next webinars because we know there are a lot of questions out there, and that we're here also to support everyone. Thank you, Desiree and Jose Luis, for your time. I know that you're like in so many groups and in so much work at this point, but it was very important for the people in the sub-region to hear from you the work that is being done. So thank you so much for everything. Thank Nicole, and thank Rian also for all your support.
Thank you very much. And so with this, I will bring our very first webinar on vaccines to a close. I would like to thank again Dr. Joy St. John, Mrs. Shutine, for bringing remarks, our panelists, Dr. Pastor, Dr. Extavour, Dr. Castro, for taking the time out to be here with us and share your insight. A very, very, very special thank you to Begonia, who was very instrumental in working with Rian and I to develop and, this entire webinar. And I don't think I am being overly ambitious to say that I think it was a great success. Thank you so much to our participants who stayed the course with us. We hope that it was very valuable information for you. As posted in the chat, the webinar was recorded, and once it is ready, it will be shared with you. We will advise whether the slides would be able to be also sent. I know there were several queries on that, and that shows how much member states were really excited about this and felt that they really learned a lot. I also want to thank the very invaluable support from our CARPHA communications and IT team, and also my admin, Michelle, who, of course, we couldn't do this without you. And I just invite everyone to fill the survey. Certificates of participation will be sent to you once they are ready. And with that, I again reiterate Rian's recommendation to visit the CARPHA website to see our situation reports, our technical guidance, and also what's next coming up in the COVID-19 health rounds, which will be a webinar for environmental health officers happening tomorrow. So with that, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening and stay safe.
Goodbye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye all.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye-bye.